Hello everyone, today is 12th of February, now it's about 1 o'clock, middle of the day by Moscow time. I'm Levan Gudadze and this is my first update for a day in which I will share all the main news that are making headlines in Russian media outlets and Russian language pages on different internet platforms. And there are quite a few very significant developments and news that I'd like to share with you for this moment, although before I start, let me notice that quite often I have second news updates on my Patreon and Boosty pages, and if you are looking for more news from Russia, more commentary or better understanding of Russian or pro-Russian view on some major developments in this world, I hope you will consider to join our communities on Patreon and Boosty, where I have extra content, news updates, some other content on regular basis. As I said, the links are on this video in description box and in the pinned comment. And also I want to notice that probably veterans of our community recognize this background, and if they are asking questions, is Levan in Vladikavkaz now? Answer is yes. This is the reason why I did not have an update yesterday and day before, or the live stream on Sunday. I traveled to Vladikavkaz and I will stay here for several days and report about news from capital of North Ossetia Alania, Autonomous Republic of the Russian Federation. I will try to make some videos from the streets of Vladikavkaz in Alex Christoforou style, walk and talk style, at least for Patreon and Boosty, and hopefully community will find those videos interesting. I will try to highlight how Vladikavkaz is doing in February 2025. You know, rumors that are popular in the West that it's only Moscow and Moscow region that standard of life is more or less okay, but you move little far and it's a kind of desert. That's kind of nonsense that Western propaganda outlets pushing on the public. Well, I'm 2,000 kilometers away from Moscow, right? And the next several days I will try to highlight how life is going here. Anyways, that's being said, let's go through some news now. And well, in videos for Patreon and Boosty, I will explain why I came in Vladikavkaz, for how long. But this is main pages on YouTube and Rumble, so it's all about news, isn't it? So first report is about statements of Russian Defense Ministry, according to which Russian armed forces liberated Yasinovo settlement in west of DPR. Let me show you on the map this settlement. So it's a southern western part of Pokrovsk sector. This is Yasinovo settlement, which is liberated now, and on the western side from Yasinovo there is a Novoandreevka settlement and Sribnoye settlement. Both villages are in a gray zone now. I guess Russian forces are finalizing clearing operation in this settlement, and also in Nadeevka on the northern side from Sribnoye. And I guess in next several days, maybe even today, we will receive additional update from Defense Ministry that these settlements, among some others on line of contact, have been liberated. Also, initiative is of course in Russian hands all along the front line, and despite all their attempts of Kiev regime to regain control or initiative on any of the directions, and despite all their suicidal counteroffensives that Kiev regime's forces are conducting, they're narrow-headed and will never have a chance to have operational control on any of the sectors of the front line to regain initiative. This proxy war that West is waging against Russia is basically finished. Only formalization is left. Russia obviously defeated Western proxies and the Western ruling class. And it's a matter of time when the so-called elites in the West will face the reality and acknowledge their defeat. But until now, unfortunately, hostilities on the line of contact will continue, destruction and death will continue, which is obviously tragic, but that's the objective reality that we are facing. Also, RIA Novosti's report, dear friends, that this morning, during the nighttime and early this morning, Russian armed forces conducted long-range, precise strike on military and logistics infrastructure of the Kiev regime. There was explosions in Kiev and in some other areas. And several minutes ago, Russian Defense Ministry, according to RIA Novosti, made a statement by saying that Russian armed forces conducted a long-range precise strike on the military-industrial complex of Kiev regime, and all the targets were reached and neutralized. According to reporter, one of their main targets were manufacturing facilities where drones were produced for Kiev regime. Also, according to reports, after these strikes occur in several regions in Kiev controlled territory, including in capital, there was blackouts, and these blackouts still are in force. So most likely some energo facilities were targeted also, and this is obviously almost a daily occurrence now, because for example, videos, more and more videos are appearing on internet which highlights, for example, recent strikes of Russian armed forces on gas infrastructure of the Kiev regime in, for example, Poltava region. On your screen now you can see a huge fire on the horizon there, which is exactly the result of a successful Russian strike on gas field and gas infrastructure in Poltava region. Usually Kiev regime claims very fast to claim that 100% or 99% of incoming missiles and drones were intercepted, but surprisingly this time Kiev regime said literally nothing about this strike in Poltava region. Reports are that some up to 20 missiles and drones were deployed by Russian forces to take out that energo facility, energo infrastructure in Poltava area. Also, dear friends, we have this report from TASS news agency that unfortunately, which confirms that unfortunately, despite all quite regular Russian strikes on military-industrial complex of Kiev regime, Zelensky and his criminal associates still have a means to launch long-range strikes deep into Russian territory and to conduct terrorist activity. And for example, we have a report this morning that drone exploded, Ukrainian drone exploded some 300 meters from a nuclear reactor of Zaporozhye nuclear power plant. Drone failed on a car park, probably due to some miscalculation by Kiev regime's forces, or maybe as a result of effective work of Russian radio-electronic warfare system. In any case, drone hopefully, thankfully, did not reach reactor itself, and it failed some only 300 meters away. This information once again highlights how important it is to continue process of denazification and demilitarization of this so-called Ukraine, and how important it is to completely neutralize Kiev regime. Because as long as Kiev regime exists under whatever leadership, it is going to be threat for Russia and for humanity in general. And when it comes to Kiev regime, we have Kommersant newspaper's report here about interview that Zelensky, formerly president of Ukraine, although illegitimate, obviously, Zelensky gave to a Guardian propaganda outlet from UK, and he once again spoke about some nonsensical stuff during this interview, including about Kursk salient area, and he claimed that Kiev, due to this invasion into Kursk region, Kiev now in a position to dictate something to Moscow, and eventually to exchange Kursk salient area into some other territories that is under Russian control. And the rumors are that Zelensky and his Western backers are dreaming about reclaiming Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, and obviously this is nonsense. Obviously this is nonsense. I spoke about this many times before. Kursk salient is effectively a trap created by Russian forces for Kiev regime's formations. More than 57,000 military personnel of Kiev regime and NATO mercenaries were already neutralized in the Kursk salient area. Thousands of pieces of military equipment, mostly Western one. I remind you, dear friends, that these 10-15 brigades that were involved in this Kursk invasion were basically last strategical reserves, more or less capable strategical reserves that Kiev regime had. And those reserves are decimated now, and according to reports, Zelensky and his associates are forced to remove some more or less battle-capable formations now, units from other sectors of the front line, to direct them to Sumy region as a reserve, and then eventually into Kursk salient, because of their high losses that Kiev regime's forces and NATO mercenaries are suffering in Kursk salient area. And dear friends, as long as Zelensky and his associates, their Western backers, are so deep in this illusion that this borderline, tiny borderline area of Kursk region is so important strategically that they can force Russia to do something to exchange Zaporozhye nuclear power plant for this territory or some other parts of already liberated territories. As long as they are this delusional, obviously they will continue to send more and more troops into this trap that Kursk salient has begun, and obviously Russian forces will have a continuous opportunity to neutralize Kiev regime's forces in this trap, rather than face them on other sectors of the front line, which actually has a strategical importance and where Russian troops are actually very successful moving forward. So Donetsk sector, Pokrovsk sector, Kurachovo sector, Chisov Yar direction, Kupiansk sector, where Russian forces, by the way, step by step, but almost liberated entire territory that from where Russian troops regrouped in 2023, that was, isn't it? Almost entirely. Not yet there, but obviously progress is so significant that I guess it's only a matter of time, and Izium and many other settlements will become under full Russian control. Eventually, entire Kharkov region also, obviously. So, yes, interesting that Zelensky and many from his inner circle and his backers in the West still are this deep into this crazy idea, crazy narrative that they can force Russia to do anything by maintaining their presence into Kursk salient area. I don't know, man. This how stupid someone has to believe in that. I don't know. But you know what is interesting also? Lately, I noticed some pattern when it comes to Western propaganda, which is that almost on daily basis, surely for weekly basis, at least some big name in Western propaganda publishes some interview with Zelensky, usually long interview, allowing him, not just giving the platform to Zelensky, but allowing him to say whatever nonsense he can come up with. And I was wondering, what is the reason? Because these interviews actually are discrediting Zelensky and his associates. These interviews, these long interviews, are actually destroying Kiev regime and whatever narratives Kiev regime is standing on. And I come up with only explanation for now, which is that well, seems like at least certain groups in the Western ruling class are really facing the reality now. Not all of them, but at least certain influential groups really are beginning to face the reality, acknowledge that they lost this proxy war against Russia, and potentially they really want to de-escalate. And those groups probably are standing behind Trump also. And therefore, if this is the case, it does make sense if this group will use its influence over the certain propaganda outlets to promote such interviews, to encourage these propaganda outlets to do these long interviews with Zelensky and let him talk as much as possible, because more he talks, less sense his statements make, right? I guess at this point, even diehard supporters of Zelensky's regime or extreme Russophobes in the West are struggling to understand what Zelensky is talking about at all, right? And his henchmen in these interviews. And I noticed this pattern I'm noticing this pattern for a while now, at least from an interview that Zelensky gave to Lex Fridman, US blogger, who I believe is an asset of CIA. In my personal opinion, maybe I'm wrong, by the way, I don't know, but I think this person, Lex Fridman, is an asset of CIA, and he was first to actually give platform to Zelensky in this manner, to let him talk as much crap as he possibly can. And that's what Zelensky did, and many of his supporters were quite upset because of the language he used, because of the statements that he made, and for many reasons. And since then, almost every week, by the way, there is an interview after interview after interview when he makes more and more crazy stuff. Just recently, there was some videos on internet of Zelensky's interview with Piers Morgan, for example. I did not watch that interview, as I did not watch interview of Zelensky with Lex Fridman. I just don't have time for that crap, right? But I see some short videos, and during his conversation, Zelensky's talk with Piers Morgan, he started demanding nuclear weapons, isn't it? Also a topic that will make nervous many extreme Russophobes in the West, because they don't want to die, actually. They don't want to Third World War to be provoked, right? They might hate Russia as much as they possibly can, but still they want to live, you know? And when Zelensky is talking about acquiring some nukes, and when Zelensky said, for example, Podolyak just a couple of days ago during one of the interviews, saying that direct war between US and Russia would be beneficial for the regime. And when they hear that kind of stuff, they are beginning to worry, you know. Understandably so, because yet again they don't want to die in possible full-scale conflict between NATO and Russia, which will mean end of everything. And so, yes, it is clearly a pattern. Just a couple of days ago, Reuters had an interview with Zelensky, during which Zelensky demonstrated some maps and gave some crazy talks. He was offering Trump some territories that are actually liberated by Russian forces. So by doing so, he was kind of inviting US troops to directly fight Russia for those territories. I mean, as I'm telling you, dear friends, it is clearly a pattern that Zelensky is given a platform to allow him to talk as much nonsense as possible, which will make it much easier, by the way, for Western ruling class, at least some parts of the Western ruling class that fed up with all this proxy war against Russia and all this crisis, to remove him actually from office and to really take some steps towards the escalation. Question is, what about other part of the Western ruling class that is still all about continuation or prolongation of this war, but let them deal with each other, isn't it? And when it comes to fate of Zelensky, well, more and more outlets, more and more journalists, by the way, are actually openly now saying that Zelensky's time is up, and Western ruling class, Western elites, at least some groups there, already working to replace him with some other individuals that could be more useful to de-escalate. because they are realizing that Zelensky is actually obstacle on the path of the escalation. And for example, RIA Novosti paid attention to article in a Post-Times newspaper. I'm not familiar with this newspaper, by the way. I don't even know from which country this paper is, but anyways, I cannot know all the media outlets worldwide, isn't it? It's just not possible, really. Only for AIs, maybe, or artificial general intelligence, even. But anyways, RIA Novosti did pay attention to this article in Post Times, which claims that Trump's administration is actually interested in removing Zelensky because they consider him as a deadweight and a significant obstacle on the path towards the escalation. And the article itself, I don't know what kind of sources this newspaper has in White House or in Washington, but topic itself definitely does make sense. I was predicting that Zelensky will be removed for quite a while, and I was predicting that, I was even saying names that probably will replace Zelensky. For example, Zaluzhny, isn't it? Veterans of our community know about it. And now, by the way, now even Ukrainian journalists and publications, media outlets, are talking about it. And for example, yesterday, Ukrainian journalist, public figure, politician Anatoly Shary, who has a huge following, by the way, on internet, just on YouTube, he has like 3.24 million followers, right? Which is, I mean, huge, obviously. For someone who talks about politics, by the way, he does not make some entertaining content, right? And Anatoly Shary is a Ukrainian journalist, as I said, public figure, in exile. He used to live in Spain. I don't know where he lives now, because he was targeted by Kiev regime several times, he and his family. So he's definitely in a position to be as careful as possible to protect his family, first of all. And he is a permanent critic of Kiev regime for the crimes that they committed against Ukraine, and Ukrainian critic. And so yesterday he published this video that US, with headline that US plans to replace Zelensky with Zaluzhny. And by the way, Anatoly Shary already proved on many occasions that he does has quite informed sources in Ukraine, because very many times his predictions were actually accurate, very accurate. Not always, but quite often. And now in this video he was explaining what is going on around Zelensky and why most likely he will be replaced by Zaluzhny. And when it comes to figure of Zaluzhny, who was obviously head of general staff of Kiev regime and now is ambassador of Ukraine in UK, I also was saying, I don't know, for a very long time now, that most likely Zaluzhny will be the figure that will replace Zelensky. And if Anatoly Shary is on the same page too now, then I guess that's exactly what is going to happen. At least Zaluzhny definitely has big chances to replace Zelensky. Question is how this will play out. There is two options that I can tell. Either militaries will forcefully remove Zelensky from office, then they will appoint elections in which Zaluzhny will be given a majority of votes, and he will be appointed by Western ruling class as a next president. Either West will force Zelensky himself now to appoint elections in next 3 to 5 months and to basically hand over powers to Zaluzhny. But in any case, Zelensky is finished, by the way, that's for sure. And I guess Zelensky himself and his associates do understand that. And now they are fighting not so much for maintaining power in Kiev, but to maintain wealth that they steal from all these tens and hundreds of billions of dollars and euros that formerly was allocated for Kiev regime. These people become filthy rich, by the way, multi-billionaires, right, including Zelensky. And I think they are now concerned mainly about securing their own safety and securing wealth that they steal from this foreign aid. And by doing so, they are capable of blackmail. They are capable of any sort of provocation. This is for sure. And they have some means, by the way, to be effective in this blackmail, right? And for example, we have exactly on that topic, we have this report now from RT that Kiev is plotting to drag NATO into a war against Russia. And this is reported by Russian Foreign Intelligence Service. That definitely has much more information that we will ever have, right? Or public will ever have. Anyways, let's go through this news. So Ukrainian special services with the Western support are preparing a series of high-profile provocations to implicate Moscow and draw NATO into direct military confrontation, according to Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, SVR, in short. In a statement on Tuesday, the SVR claimed that Kiev plans to use Russian-made naval mines to orchestrate an explosion involving foreign vessels in the Baltic Sea. The alleged goal is to blame Moscow and prompt NATO to restrict Russia's access to Baltic on the pretext of ensuring maritime security. Well, I did speak about possibility that Kiev regime with active support of Western secret services that are under control of that group in the Western ruling class that are all about prolongation of this war, that they will come up with some false flag operations to in many areas, in many directions, including in Baltics, to harass then Russian commercial vessels and to kind of shut down Baltic Sea for Russia, which will definitely provoke Moscow to take some strong steps. And seems like that's exactly what Russia's Foreign Intelligence Services is talking about now, right? Let's continue with this news. And by the way, when it comes to false flag operations, we already see some. Remember, like couple of months ago, this new creation of this new narrative started in the West through Western propaganda that almost every other week some undersea cables were broke or cut in the Baltics. Almost every other week, and I find it suspicious straight away. But but I did not say nothing initially. But after some time, it has just become too clear that this is false flag operation, by the way, which will be used by Western ruling class then to implement on this false narrative that Russia is cutting some underwater cables to basically increase presence of the military vessels of the NATO in the Baltics, and then to harass Russian civilian ships or commercial vessels of other countries that are cooperating with Russia, right? That's exactly what happened. And that's exactly what happened. Based on this false narrative, NATO declared some maritime operation, isn't it? So we already did see false flag operations. So SVR definitely has points there. But unfortunately, it is extremely high risk that this is just the beginning and more provocations is underway, including targeting of foreign vessels, potentially even military vessels of NATO, let's say. They will then blame Russia for that. And who knows how far escalation will go from there. It might even provoke direct conflict. What definitely is seen by Zelensky's regime as some sort of opportunity for them to be saved, because then focus will be not on them, but on direct confrontation between Moscow and other NATO capitals. But anyways, let's continue with this news. So NATO has been increasing its military activities along Eastern Europe's border in recent years, citing security concerns over Russia. Last month, It announced plans to expand its presence in the Baltics, launching a new mission to safeguard undersea infrastructure following a series of disruptions and damage to cables between member states. Russia, which perceives the Baltic Sea as a strategic area for its naval operations and energy exports, have vowed to do everything necessary to protect its interests. Last year, Nikolai Patrushev, the former head of the Russian Security Council, who currently serves as an aide to President Vladimir Putin, warned that NATO is using its newest members, Sweden and Finland, to turn the Baltics into an internal sea under Western control. Moscow has stressed that it has no intention to attack any NATO member states, but has criticized the military buildups on its borders. It has also warned that a direct confrontation between Russia and NATO could escalate into a nuclear conflict, adding that it will respond to any hostile moves. It is, in its statement, SVR also alleged that Ukraine main intelligence directorate, in collaboration with intelligence agencies from several European countries, is planning attacks on Russian non-systemic opposition figures and businessmen residing abroad. Basically, these so-called opposition figures that flee Russia, Western assets basically, that flee Russia some time ago and mainly are now somewhere in the collective West countries. And so SVR, according to SVR, Kiev regime's so-called secret services, in cooperation with some other secret services from European countries, are also plotting attacks on these figures to then blame Russia, which is also highly possible, by the way. This is definitely might happen and probably will happen. So those people that were used by West against Russia and are and were lustrated basically here in Russia and therefore were forced to flee the country. Those people should take care of themselves in the West, no matter in which country they are, because unfortunately, secret services of Kiev regime, with assistance of secret services of their NATO member states, already proved that they are quite capable of killing people in different countries, in Russia, in some other countries, and they can take such attacks, they can conduct such attacks in any country of Europe or the US. No doubts about that. That will be even easier for them than to target someone in Russia. So, yet again, we have no reason to doubt this report of SVR that there is a high risk that such attacks will happen. I'm quite sure that it will. At some point, this will definitely happen. But yet again, main concern, I don't care about those Western assets that flee Russia. Western secret services can do with their assets whatever they want. Okay, they can use Kiev regime to neutralize them or some other forces. It's their business. I don't care really, and I don't think this topic as dangerous in long run as Baltic provocations in the Baltics, for example, which might actually provoke a direct war. If Western secret services, with their use of Kiev regime, eliminate some so-called opposition figures from Russia, they might use it for another anti-Russian hysteria, another wave of anti-Russian hysteria, for additional sanctions. But at this point, how much anti-Russian hysteria how far with anti-Russian hysteria they gonna go, man? Everybody who was stupid enough to believe in this anti-Russian Russophobic nonsense already believes in that. I don't think anymore these hoax of false stories or false accusations of Russia will add anything to that contingent, right? Which is unfortunately big part of Western societies. But I don't think anybody from informed minorities in the West will, will be fooled by these provocations, false flag operations, right, by the Western secret services or the Kiev regime. But when it comes to Baltic Sea and potential military provocations, that's obviously very different stuff, because let's say Kiev regime with active participation of secret services of Poland or Baltic states, let's say Sweden or Finland, these countries are run by extreme Russophobes, by the way. They will sacrifice everybody in their own countries to harm Russia. That's how sick they are with Russophobia. And I'm not exaggerating, even slightest. These so-called elites in Poland, in the Baltic states, in Finland, in Sweden are so extremely Russophobic, by the way, so extreme xenophobes, that they will sacrifice their own citizens, everybody in their countries, to harm Russia at least a little bit. And similar situation is in many other NATO member states, by the way. But these ones are clearly, standing out as extremes among extremes, right? So it is a possibility that with the participation of Polish secret services, but Lithuanian, Latvian, Estonian secret services, Finnish or Swedish secret services of UK, by the way, because UK's elites historically hate Russia, historically, right? And sometimes I think it is requirement for everybody who seeks to reach a position of elites in UK to be extreme Russophobe, because they all are, and so yes, with participation of secret services of these countries, it is highly likely, it is clearly possible that some attack may be conducted with a Soviet-era mine or Russian-built mine that was exported sometime in the past summer. With these mines, some NATO vessel can be targeted, US military vessel, for example, and then these very countries, NATO member states that were involved in this false flag operation, can demand fifth article to be enforced. Or maybe it would not be US Navy vessel, but British Navy vessel, let's say, or Polish Navy vessel, or Finnish or Norwegian. These very countries then might demand fifth article to be invoked, right, and enforce. And that way you are on direct path towards full-scale war between NATO and Russia. And at that point, no one would remember Zelensky and his criminal associates and how many billions they stole, because world would stand on edge of extinction. And after all, Podolyak, by the way, aide of Zelensky, just a couple of days ago stated, isn't it, that direct conflict between US and Russia actually would benefit them. He said it openly, they're not even hiding their intentions. So this is obviously very important statements that SVR is making, Russian Foreign Intelligence Service, and I'm quite sure informed minority worldwide, in the West, by the way, in worldwide majority is actually informed, but in the collective West, majority is misinformed, minority is well-informed. So well-informed minority will know straight away if any provocation happens against the so-called opposition figures that flee Russia, or if any military provocation happens in the Baltics against NATO member states vessel or commercial vessel of NATO member state or anything like that. Informed minority will know straight away this is a false flag operation conducted by NATO itself, NATO member states. But majority, unfortunately, will still believe in whatever nonsense they will receive from Western MSM, Western propaganda outlets, and therefore they would not be able to influence their political leadership and to avoid potentially full-scale confrontation, while informed minorities is not in position to influence decision-making process of their elites. Only majority at least have a theoretical chance to have a say But anyways, topic definitely is important and deserves our attention. But there is some more, by the way. There is some more news, obviously. And for example, TASS News Agency is reporting about first documented case of a French Scalp missile being used to strike deep into Russian territory. And there is a video also, by the way, here. Sappers of Russian Ministry of Emergency Situations are neutralizing these fragments of French Scalp EG missile, and it is a French Scalp EG because there is signs all over the fragments of this missile, and you can see on your screen right now the sign says France, isn't it? It says France. So this is the first documented case of French Scalp EG cruise missile being used to strike deep into Russian territory. Before, usually, in reports of Russian Defense Ministry, there was mentioning of US-made ATACMS long-range missile or ATACMS ballistic missile, also British Storm Shadow missile that was used to strike deep into Russia. And now we have a documented case that French Scalp EG was also used to strike deep into Russian territory. And if situation between if confrontation between West and Russia will further escalate, as I predict, because I believe we will face at least one more level of escalation, and only then the escalation may start through the escalation. So if my understanding is correct, and we are about to observe a next level of escalation in this proxy war that West is waging against Russia, then we might see Russian response also. Not just large-scale strikes deep into Russian territory by NATO missiles, but also Russian response, strong response. And not just against Kiev regime or against assets on Kiev-controlled territory, but also against assets of NATO member states that are directly involved in these strikes deep into Russian Federation. And these countries, we know names of these countries, right? Which countries they are. It's US because ATACMS missiles are used for these strikes. It's a UK because Storm Shadow cruise missiles are used for these strikes. And it is France because now we have documented case that French Scalp EG missiles were also used for these long-range strikes deep into Russia. So potentially there is a possibility that if Russian leadership decides that it is enough is enough and it is time to retaliate against these countries too and their assets, well, I guess that's what is going to happen, and it will be not just US military assets or British military assets, but also French military assets somewhere, not just on Kiev controlled territory, but elsewhere too. So that's why I wanted to highlight, by the way, this report, because I believe this is first case when first documented case that Scalp EG was used. I never heard before, never read before news about Scalp EGs being used for this long-range strikes deep into Russia. Anyways, let's continue. And obviously at this point, everybody, not just in our community but worldwide, probably heard name of Marc Fogel, a criminal that was freed by Russia, and he's already arrived in US. He even had meeting with Donald Trump, I believe. So the story is that representative special envoy of Trump to Middle East, actually, I believe, visited Russia. He went to foreign ministry, and also US ambassador was in foreign ministry. No statements were made about what is happening. And later on we learned that Russia freed this person, Marc Fogel, who was charged here in Russia and prosecuted for drug trafficking. Maybe he is a CIA asset, by the way. Maybe asset of some other Western Secret Service. I don't know. But because of this huge media campaign in the West, in the US especially, around this figure, I guess he was not just some random drug trafficker. And even though there was no report that US freed any Russian citizen that is in captivity in US, probably it will happen, even if information would not be disclosed to public, because that's what usually takes place, isn't it? One side releases number of prisoners, and then another side releases similar number of prisoners. Sometimes not necessarily similar, but you know. And probably in upcoming days we will learn that US also released some Russian citizens that were in captivity in US. Maybe some other US citizens that are in captivity in Russia will be released also, which is a good deal, by the way. In general, this is good that at least something positive is happening in relationships. And while watching some short videos about statements that were made in the West in regards to this story, I noticed that statements of US officials were quite restrained. Usually, they love to brag about stuff, and they love to act as some sort of gangsters, and they did bully this and that, and look at what we did to them, and this. They love to act crazy, right? But this time, comments that I see was quite adequate, at least from what I see, including from Trump, by the way, which really surprised me. We know how Trump talks, isn't it? I mean, he loves to act as I don't know, some sort of gangster or stuff, and even he was quite respectful in his comments and thankful, actually, for Russian side for taking this goodwill gesture. Okay, all good, by the way. It's all good. I have no issues with this reporter. Maybe more people will be released between the sides. Okay, any positivity at these critical times, by the way, is something good. I think. So yes, same time, by the way, Trump once again stated that there is some serious progress achieved in resolving Ukrainian crisis, which is statement that confuses many, I guess. Confuses many because no one understands what he's talking about. No one understands what he's talking about. And unfortunately, more and more often, Trump's statements are so confusing, too confusing, not just for outside world, but seems like even for his own inner circle. And therefore, these people that are in Trump's administration are struggling to explain to public what US president meant by saying this and that. And if this is going to continue this way, by the way, Trump's presidency is going to be extremely wild ride, not just for US, but for the entire world, isn't it? Because how are you going to know what he's talking about, what he means by saying some stuff? This is quite strange, just strange. Biden was barely able to say anything, and everyone understood that Biden was not in decision-making process anyways. But with Trump, probably there is some different situation. Although major decisions are made by people that are in shadow, that allow Trump to become a president. Trump himself probably are also involved in some decision-making process, right? At least on some levels. And therefore, because he is a president of a major superpower in this world, it is kind of dangerous that nobody understands what he's talking about, It's just too much confusion on that. And when it comes to this, his constant statements that there is some progress in regards to the escalation of Ukrainian crisis, in regards to relationships with Russia, yet again, I mean, questions are what he's talking about, because recently, as you know, Trump also stated that he had a conversation with Putin that went well. And obviously, Peskov, press spokesman of the Russian president, was asked about a phone conversation between two leaders. And if he can even at least confirm information that two presidents actually spoke on the phone. And Peskov was unable to confirm this information, by the way, which means that there was no such a conversation. But Trump said there was. Right? It's crazy, man. I mean, it's just really too much confusion. And Peskov was forced basically to say, to avoid direct answer, that he cannot confirm or deny reports in the media that there was a phone conversation between Trump and Putin, which in other words means that there was no conversation, right? But Moscow don't want Trump to look as a liar, right? Moscow don't want to have anything to do with it. Let public decide on its own. So therefore, press spokesman chose this wording that they cannot confirm or deny. I mean, what is to confirm, by the way? If there was a phone conversation, just say that yes, I mean, they spoke, and we cannot disclose topics of discussions, but phone conversation itself did take place. It will actually benefit this world. People will little calm down, right? People that are too nervous that Third World War are about to erupt. But because such a conversation did not happen, Peskov could not lie, isn't it? Publicly to billions of people that yes, there was conversation. So he said that he cannot confirm or deny anything on that topic. So yes, man, it's really already wild, right? Since Trump is in office, and it's gonna get even wilder, though, even wilder. I don't know what to expect from that, but unpredictability is never good, by the way, or very rarely good stuff, especially when it comes to superpowers, isn't it? The newspaper, meanwhile, is reporting that new head of Pentagon, Peter Hegseth, reacted on rumors or publications in the media, in the Western media, first of all, that U.S. plans to withdraw some 20,000 troops from Europe, and he said that Pentagon, at least for now, has no plans to withdraw any troops from Europe at all. And why would the U.S. withdraw its troops from Europe, by the way? I mean, it's occupation force, right? By keeping their troops in Europe, Washington is actually declaring or demonstrating who is the boss there. It's occupation forces. Let's be clear on that. They can call each other allies or whatever, and justify presence of U.S. troops in Europe by any means. Who cares? But in reality, this is occupation force, by the way, especially when it comes to Germany and Italy, right? It is occupation force. And well, U.S. has no plans to withdraw any forces from anywhere, actually, especially from Europe. And I mean, mark my word, dear friends, if now US has some 800 bases worldwide or 900 under Trump's administration, this number will probably reach 1,000 and higher. Just let's wait for a couple of years. That's definitely going to be a case. And US spending on defense will definitely reach $1 trillion. I have no doubts about that. Maybe even next year. Meanwhile, by the way, very same head of Pentagon, Pat Hegseth, spoke about U.S. troops deployments into Ukraine, which is kind of interesting too. So let's go through this news. The administration of U.S. President Donald Trump has no plans to send American soldiers to Ukraine, Defense Secretary Pat Hexet has said, as Washington seeks to shift the burden of supporting Kiev into its European allies. Hexet's statements on Tuesday came as Kat Kellogg, their U.S. presidential envoy tasked with ending the Ukraine conflict, is set to meet with European officials at the Munich Security Conference on Friday to promote Trump's so-called peace plan. At the Ukraine Contact Group and the NATO Ministerial, we are going to have a straight talk with our friends, Hexet told reporters at the press conference in Germany. And then quote again, it ought to be those in a neighborhood investing the most in that collective and individual defense, he said, adding that Washington wants NATO states to spend more than 2% of GDP in defense. We believe that needs to be higher. The president has said 5%. Well, this 5% is really extreme, by the way, for any country in Europe. German leadership already said that they are just not in position to afford that, because 5% of GDP means almost half of federal budget. Which is crazy, isn't it? If you are spending half of federal budget just on defense, then what about other sectors? It's just nonsense. French leadership said that they will make it up to 5% in upcoming years, but I think this is also just a talk. I don't think France is in a position. If Germany cannot afford it, Europe's number one economy, then France definitely cannot afford that, man. Nothing to be said about smaller countries that they can spend entire their budgets on defense. No one cares really. Countries like Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania, who cares about them, right? Really. In Russia or in the West or in anywhere in this world, does anybody cares about the Chihuahua states? Honestly, I guess even locals don't care. Anyways, well, interesting statement from Hexet. In one hand, it is good that Pentagon is saying that they have no plans to deploy at least large formations of armed forces into Ukraine and get involved in this crisis. But in other hand, U.S. military personnel and intelligence services already actively operating in Ukraine, are actively engaged in these hostilities against Russia. They already suffered significant casualties, right? All these long-range strikes with ATACMS, by the way, we all know that these attacks are conducted by U.S. military personnel with direct involvement of U.S. militaries from Pentagon and of officials from CIA, right? So Hexet is not necessarily not 100% honest here. Otherwise, he would say that there is a small contingent of U.S. troops there, but we have no plans to increase it to some significant number. That will make more sense, but at this point, I guess U.S. is pretending to have on its hand this plausible deniability still, which is not the case, because everyone knows these long-range strikes with ATACMS, Storm Shadows, Scalp PGs cannot be done by Kyiv regime itself. It's just not possible because Zelensky and his criminal associates have no means to launch such attacks with those weapon systems. Only US in case of ATACMS, UK in case of Storm Shadows, and France in case of Scalp PGs can conduct such a long-range strikes. It is what it is. Anyways, let's continue. And we have this interesting report also from RT that Trump is about to send the Treasury Secretary to Kiev. US President Donald Trump announced on Tuesday that he will be sending Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent to Ukraine. The trip, which could take place as soon as this week, will include discussions of potential deal for rare earth minerals in exchange for aid to Kiev, according to various media reports. So, okay. Trump and his team is very much focused on this topic of rare earth from so-called Ukraine, and they are not just focused, but Trump actually demanded some 500 billion, by the way, from Kiev regime, and this is not a joke, as many of you know. He actually demanded 500 billion, and that's this news about. That's what this news is about. So let's go through it. US President Donald Trump has said he wants to secure a deal with the Kiev to ensure Washington gets its money back by trading aid for Ukraine's rare earth minerals, regardless of whether they might be Russian someday, which is interesting. Trump is acknowledging that he said certain places, right, that will be liberated, already are liberated and are Russia, and will be liberated and will join Russia. And these areas, it happened that these areas that are part of this Russian world are very rich with many things, including rare earth materials. And it is somewhat interesting statement from Trump that he's acknowledging that these territories one day may actually, become Russia. In an interview with the Fox News' Brett Bayer, Trump claimed that the United States is in for more than 300 billion, probably 350, in various forms of aid to Ukraine, adding that it would be stupid for Washington to continue bankrolling Kiev without receiving anything in return. I want, end quote, I want her to have our money secured because we are spending hundreds of billions of dollars, he said. They have a tremendously valuable land in terms of rare earth, in terms of oil and gas, in terms of other things. I told them that I want to equivalent like 500 billion worth of rare earth, and they essentially agreed to do that, Trump stated. So at least we do not feel stupid, otherwise we are stupid. I said to them, we have to get something. And this is all quotes from Trump. And dear friends, as you are probably confused with these numbers, I am confused also because according to official statements, US Congress authorized some 170 to 175, 76 billion dollars for formerly Kiev regime, but I never heard anything about 300 and 350 billion from US alone. I don't know, maybe Trump knows. I mean, he looked at some classified data and he come up with this number. That might be the case because we just simply don't know, but it is quite interesting, at least, isn't it, that Trump is actually doubling the number that we knew when it comes to billions and billions that was stolen from US taxpayers formally to back this beacon of democracy in Eastern Europe, right? So-called Ukraine. But in reality, we all understand where this money went, by the way. 90% of it went to military-industrial complex of US and also corrupt officials, and some 10% maybe reach Ukraine actually, and 90% from that 10% eventually went to pockets of Zelensky and that kind of figures there. That's how they become filthy rich. But anyways, Trump is openly saying now that he wants some 500 billion from for all their investments, let's say, as they say, in Ukraine, and I guess one way or another, but US will get something out of it. Maybe in Western Ukraine, because the rest of the territory of this former Soviet Republic is actually historical Russia, and will join Russia one way or another, but will join Russia, and it will have nothing, and US will have no business there, right? Although I can see possibility that Trump during discussions, or Trump's team during discussions with the Russian side, may actually negotiate with Russia that, you know what, we're gonna stop any, we want to end this conflict, right? It was not our war. These stupid idiots, these idiots from Biden's administration and some other creatures started this. We don't want anything to do with it, and therefore let's end it. Although, and you take what you take, and we will keep, let's say, Western Ukraine for whatever reason. To make Poland happy, for example, Hungary happy, Romania happy, and for ourselves also. But you take rest of it, do whatever you want. But let's have agreement that your businesses, your companies will cooperate with our companies when it comes to development of some minefields that are rich with some certain elements that your economy needs, our economy needs. I mean, there can be some ground for negotiations there because we see attitude that Trump has. For him, everything is business. It seems like he sees everything as a playing field for business, for negotiations. So maybe whenever real talks began between Moscow and Washington, maybe sides will, maybe U.S. side will initiate conversation about potential future cooperation in regards to rare earth that will be on territories that will join Russia, already joined Russia, or will be in the zone of Russian influence. I can see that happening, potentially. I don't know, but it might happen. Anyways, it is becoming, as I said, man, it is becoming more and more wild to observe what is going on in Washington, all these statements and stuff. Meanwhile, it was Trump again that stated that if Hamas movement in Palestine, in Gaza Strip, will not release all the hostages before noon of Saturday this week, whole hell will broke out, and it did not take long before Netanyahu made a very similar statement. So we have this report here that Israel threatens to break Gaza ceasefire. Prime Minister of Israel Benjamin Netanyahu has issued an ultimatum to Hamas demanding the release of Israeli hostages by noon on Saturday. He warned that failure to comply would result in Israel terminating the current ceasefire and resuming intense military operations in the Gaza Strip. And if that happens, that will mean obviously continuation of genocide and ethnic cleansing. That will mean ethnic cleansing. I said from the beginning that most likely Netanyahu and his associates, they are seeking to implement Karabakh scenario in the Gaza Strip and to force locals out of this region. Veterans of our community remember, I guess, that I said this from very beginning of their hostilities between Israeli forces and Hamas. And unfortunately, the situation is developing in a way that seems like that's exactly what is going to happen. And when this peace deal broke a couple of weeks ago, I also said that most likely once the Israeli side will receive as many hostages as possible, maybe even all of them, then Netanyahu's regime will use any reasoning. They might even conduct some false flag operation to resume hostilities and to force all the locals out of Gaza Strip as a first phase of this genocidal assault on Palestinians. And on second phase, they will try to do the same in the West Bank. And I'm afraid that's exactly what is going to happen. That's the direction that things the situation is heading in my reading of the big picture. But you know what, I don't know. I hope I'm wrong. But what is extremely sad that world community is so ineffective that they cannot stop this madness, this tragedy, human tragedy that is happening in a Middle Eastern day-to-day basis. Interfax is reporting that energy cost, by the way, in Europe is getting more and more expensive, and we have information that gas prices, for example, on the spot market reach highest level in last 2 years, and standing at one point it was standing on $622. For now, maybe it's a little higher, a little less, but at some point it was $622 for 1,000 cubic meters. This is spot prices. Obviously, for individual customers, prices are higher, significantly higher, and will get even, and this process will not stop for quite a while, if ever, because of the policies of so-called elites in Europe, in Brussels, among Brussels bureaucracy, among a bureaucracy of few member states, majority of them. I think energy crisis, constant inflation is going to be constant presence, going to have constant presence in European markets, and hardly anything at this point can be done to reverse the situation, because too much damage is done by current so-called elites in EU. I have more reasons, actually, observing situation there. I have more reasons to believe that in 20, 30, maximum 50 years time, Europe is going to be some absolutely irrelevant part of Eurasian continent that everyone will forget about, or almost everyone. That's the direction that Europe is heading, unfortunately. It should not be that way, but tell this to Western ruling class. Seems like they don't care. They are so blind with this Russophobia and anti-Russian hysteria that they are actually destroying future of their own countries, their own societies, by pursuing this crazy idea that they have to harm Russia somehow. And well, they are harming, but more than Russia, they are harming their own countries, their own societies, and their own economies. And as long as public in the West majority is quiet about it, I don't think situation will change really. And even if sometime in the future, let's say in 5 years or 10 years, somehow some adequate people will reach position of power in some of the countries of EU, at least in some of the countries, and if they will try to normalize relationships, let's say with Russia, with the rest of the world, I don't think it's going to be easy, because of all the damage that was done to relationships. Because, I mean, let's take Moscow, by the way. How anybody in Russia, in Russian leadership, can ever trust politicians from Europe? I mean, really. How? After everything we went through, how anybody, at least in next 20, 30, 50 years time, can trust politicians from EU? I don't know. I would definitely not trust nobody, by the way. You know, if I was official, I would not trust no one from European bureaucracy. Literally no one, ever. They are just lying constantly. They cannot be trusted. It is what it is, man. And I will end this update on this news that TurkStream is working on its limits, by the way, and there are so much gas is pumped through this, so much Russian gas is pumped towards Europe through TurkStream, that I really afraid that some emergency situation may occur on these pipelines. They are just working on limit, on maximum limit, for too long now, and I mean, maybe that's just dangerous, too dangerous to to have under such a pressure this extremely complicated, complex infrastructure. But I mean, that's what is happening for a while now. For example, from 3rd to 9th of February, another record was reached when it comes to transportation of Russian gas through this pipeline, which was, a number was 390 million cubic meters, by the way, just in 1 week. Just in 1 week, 390 million cubic meters of Russian gas was pumped through Turk Stream towards Europe. And I understand this high demand in European countries. Publicly, European politicians, they love to talk about how anti-Russian they are, and that they don't want anything from Russia. But in reality, I mean, economies are dictating their terms, right? And the European economy is really struggling with their energy. And whenever they have opportunity to get some, they are using this opportunity, and they are purchasing more and more gas in Russia. And at this point, there is 2 ways that Russian gas can be delivered to Europe, 2 operational ways. One is a Turk Stream, and another is LNG, right? And volumes are increasing constantly. But at some point, this I mean, Turk Stream will actually reach point when there cannot be any more increase, because it will endanger entire infrastructure. Because this is just, I mean, it might sound cool, like record-breaking volumes and stuff, but I mean, you are overstressing entire infrastructure, and that may not be a good thing to do. And one may argue that, well, there is one pipeline from Nord Streams that, theoretically speaking, can be used also to transit Russian gas to Europe, directly to Germany. It is true, technically speaking, from 4 pipelines of Nord Stream and Nord Stream 2, 3 were destroyed as a result of US attack, and 1 is still operational technically, but I don't think Berlin will dare to even talk about opening that pipeline. German officials just too afraid of Washington, too afraid of London, by the way. They're not gonna do nothing that will upset their masters, their Anglo-Saxon masters, let's say. Although, by the way, Anglo-Saxons are Germans too, in a way, right? They all are German-speaking. Seriously, I mean, maybe some people in this world may not even know that English language is actually part of German language family, as Scandinavian languages are. So anyways, dear friends, it is what it is on the ground. Washington and London actually are in charge of Germany, and their current leadership there will never even dare to go against the wishes of their masters from these 2 capitals, London and Washington. Anyways, by the way, I'm gonna end this update now. Hopefully you will find it informative, interesting, and useful. And if so, please click that like button and leave some commentary. This is the only way we can at least try to influence algorithm, so that my videos will be shown in recommendations to reach wider audience. If you like my work, if you want to support, you can do it through donation, for example, through PayPal platform or through Boosty platform, or you can also subscribe to my Patreon page or page on Boosty. You can support through crypto if you want to. All the links, by the way, all the addresses are on this video description box and in the pinned comment. This is it for now. Have a wonderful day and take care.